In this video, we're going to start talking about CSS, which is a new language that accompanies your HTML. So HTML is your markup language, CSS is your styling language. What that means is basically HTML is just kind of organizing and identifying what different things are on the page. CSS is what makes them actually look like different things, like it changes the color, changes, the font, all these different things like that. So there's inline CSS, which you'll commonly see as something that looks like this. Well, they'll say style equals, and then we might do, some piece of text that modifies the style. But personally, I like to teach it right away as a separate document because usually CSS is presented as a separate document. So you might have noticed at the beginning of these videos, we started with an HTML document, and then I also made a .css document. If you don't have that, you can go File, New File, and we can save this as, styles.css or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go ahead and just delete that for now. And I'll just rename this one so it's a little bit easier. I'll call it that. So this is just like the HTML document. It's just a piece of text. That's all it is. And we're going to link these two together. So we're going to link the HTML to the CSS and modify how this stuff looks on our CSS document. We do all of that in the head element because, this isn't something that we're visually seeing, and it's done before the page loads. So it would be in the head element. And the easiest way to do this in Atom is just to type the word link and hit return. So the link element essentially links pages together, and not so much pages like, I have page 1 and then I click and it goes to page 2 and so on and so forth. Really, it's linking a style sheet or another type of sheet to your HTML document. So this is kind of in the background. So we have this rel, which is saying what's the relationship, and it's a style sheet. And then we have this href, right? Just like in our link, we have an href, which links to Facebook or whatever you're linking to. This href links to, this is the default, a folder called CSS, which we don't have a folder called CSS, and a file called master.css, which we don't have that either. Instead, we have a file right next to our HTML file called my.css. So I'm just going to type that in. Remember, case is important, so let's leave that there. So my.css. And now these two are linked. So things that I do in here will modify the things over here. If you have a different name, you can just change this to whatever name it is. If it's in a folder, so let's say if we had, a folder called like CSS, and this was in that folder, right? It would look like this, CSS/mycss.css, right? Very simple. They're linked together now, and we can save this. Let's hop over to our CSS file, and I'm just going to show you what a piece of CSS looks like. So I'm going to type in the letter P and then do a curly brace. A curly brace is the key right next to your P key on your keyboard, and it's Shift and then that button. And Atom will automatically put 2 in for you. So I can just hit return and get a new line, and I'm going to type in color, and let's do green. And whenever I save that, look at that. This just changed to green. So let's pause here and talk about what's happening. So CSS has a couple different elements to it. It has this part, which is called the selector, and then it has the actual property that's being modified here. So color, and then I have a colon, and then it's set to green, and then I have a semicolon. This semicolon tells the computer, this is the end of my line, this is the end of all my options I'm giving you, go to the next line. Okay, so we could also do something like font size and say 28, and it just made this paragraph larger. So what's happening? Let's just point this out. This is the selector. It's saying go to my HTML document and find the P tag. Find any P tags, so any paragraph tags. Well, here's my only paragraph tag. And then apply the following style options to it. So change the color to green, change the font size to 28. And that's what's happening. Whenever I save this document, Command S, that's whenever this is updating. All right, let's give it another try. So let's change green to red, save it, and it changes to red. So it's selecting any P in my document and doing this to it. So if we made a new paragraph and I said second paragraph, it's going to be exactly like our first paragraph, right? This is a global selector. It's selecting every instance of paragraph within my document. So let's say I want to modify this image down here. So I could go image and give it a width of 20 pixels. And we have a tiny little image now. Let's change it to 200 pixels instead. Okay, so we can see that it changes the size of this based on this value that we have here. So you can see how we give it a selector, we give it a property, and it's modifying that back on this root page, right? Let's go to the reference real quick. So on the Mozilla Developer Network document, we have a CSS reference, and this shows you the syntax. There's some more complicated selectors that we'll get into in the next video, but it's very, very simple, and if you need to find a property, you can scroll through here and look at different properties. So I could say, well, what if I want to add like a, I don't know, like a shadow or something? Is there a shadow property? And you'll find that there is in fact a drop shadow property. And if I click it, it shows me how that drop shadow works. So we go filter, drop shadow, and then we give it a bunch of options. So there's an offset X, offset Y, blur radius, spread radius, color. So this is a little more complicated, right? So let's go ahead and give that a try. So we'll do filter, and we'll say drop shadow. And then within this, we said we can just kind of copy the one that they have. Let's just do that. So I'll copy that and paste it, and we have this cool drop shadow. So this is the color right here, which I'll get into in the next video, right? So there's lots and lots and lots of functions in here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, save it, and we've written our first bit of CSS, and in the next video we're going to get really deep into it.